welcome to a very special episode of Cosmic Road where we are joined once again by Peter Maxwell Slattery. Welcome back to the show, Pete.
Thanks for having me back, Jack. It's good to connect again.
I shouldn't say this, but Pete is one of my favorite experiencers. I mean, you shouldn't have favorites, like a parent shouldn't have a favorite child, but I do, and Pete is one of them. Pete and Chris Bledsoe, they're my faves, and Peter always has such amazing insights. He's had years of incredible contact with beings, and he has a lovely place in Australia, Jaya Sanctuary, where he hosts regular CE5 events. It has all sorts of contact events. So he's going to tell us what's going on with Jaya and what's going on with his contacts and what he sees going on in the world right now. So I can't wait to get into all of that, Peter, and see where this takes us.
Definitely. Well, it is a crazy time with everything that's going on. And what I would approach this with is that this is part of that chaotic time before we hit harmony, somewhat harmony again. I use the analogy of simoscope. If anyone's got knowledge on that aspect, it would be the equivalent of when you play a key with simoscope, you can see there's geometry in the water. And before you hit the next key, let's say you can go up a key, there's chaos in between it. And it's really up to us where this goes, but it's not all bad. We tend to look at the cup half empty rather than half full. And this does have a lot to do with contact because with some of the events that are unfolding, it is a thing where would you want to be interfacing with intelligences that are treating their own kind this way? And it doesn't mean we're not worthy. This comes down to human potentiality. And this is where, which we've talked about beforehand, it goes into what humans are capable of. Now, there's the ascension aspect of telekinesis, levitation, psionics, which, as I've said, it's an old term. It's being thrown out there again, like the cool word, just like UAP was being thrown out, going from UFO. But it's really an old term that's describing human potentiality. And if we talk about that. Myself has been deep in psionics, if we want to use that term again, for 15 years publicly. And then you go to people like Greer and even James Gilliland. And James goes back over 40 years if we want to talk about psionics in that aspect of not just self-mastery and human potentiality, but contact. So there's a lot going on, but it does apply in terms of you get access to that which you've risen to the occasion for. And I know that you've been delving into some stuff as well, researching and what have you into all this as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The potential of the human mind and not just consciousness abilities, but energetic abilities as I see it. I'm into Reiki and Qigong, and I love the chi and the energy, and I love to feel the chi and interact with it as much as I can, healing and other ways of interacting with chi and doing things with that. And I don't see that as separate from consciousness abilities. It's,
No.
spiritual abilities, if you will. I mean, I don't even know how exactly to phrase it. You probably have a better understanding of all of that than I do.
Well, I think we're just throwing terms at it to describe it or to try and make it fit, but it is all one thing as you're describing, Jack. So what I'll say here, and this is a good segue, is a lot of people going, oh, well, Pete does CE5 every day. And it's like, no, I don't. I don't sit outside. I go outside and know when they're here. But what I do, and I am a Qigong teacher as well as a teacher in different disciplines of yoga and meditation. But when I am doing it, what I call it is IC. And this is before I even knew Greer was doing it or James. Now, what I call IC is a play of words for IC, we could say with the mind's eye. But it's also a word describing initiating contact. So the difference between myself and many others, now there are people like me, James, Chris, and I'm sure Greer and others that they just know when the crafts are there, they go out and they're there. That's one thing. But when you're dealing with a group to initiate contact, which takes it now from individual contact to group contact, we're talking about a different thing. So initiating contact, what it is it's clearing the space and creating a sacred space because going back before I was known for all this, I'm the guy who'd call to some of the most haunted locations. Sometimes people that thought they were living in a haunted house were having contact. Some people that thought they were having contact with ET or transdimensional intelligences. It was more, we could say, a haunting where the residual or intelligent going on. So I saw a blend going back then, but what I also saw was people opening up and not knowing about prayers or clearings and inviting anything in. And I know some of the top investigators on the planet, and I've advised some people over the years as well, which goes right up the chain because what's occurring and what people don't know is that a lot of these well known investigators and shows are doing prayers and clearings before and after the investigation and during because they're well aware of there's things out there that don't have humans' interests in high regard. Now, it doesn't mean everything's bad either. It's a very small percentage of what I would consider dark intelligences out there. But if you're opening to anything or everything, it's not a good thing. So, coming back to IC, initiating contact is creating a sacred space, setting the intention, inviting them, not summoning them. And then when they appear, it's now going into what I call, and it's a bit of a bait word, connecting to your guides technique because really we want to be able to interface with the highest expression of ourself. But this technique I came up with many years ago, and it's free. These things are free on the website. People can go to the initiating contact protocols page. But my point with this is you've initiated contact, you've got an orb there, there's a craft there, a being's materialized in front of you. Now what do you do?
I like it.
Nobody's talking about that.
Right. Yeah. Now what?
You know what I mean? All
Yeah.
right. So
Yeah.
this is where it's projecting or having the thought, what thoughts, feelings, visions come back. So some of the intelligences are very well at projecting visions that come with a thought, a feeling, an emotion, a knowingness. And there is a sensation that occurs. This is very common with all contact. There's a byproduct of their light field overlapping ours that you may not be able to see, but it's an energetic signature of that being independently. And sometimes they can use consciousness assisted technologies because they're psionic too, to an extent. Now, they may have some natural beings on the vehicle, or they could be in their light body that they don't need a vehicle. And they're naturally great at psionics, but sometimes they're using consciousness assisted technology. But really, the method of communication is projecting a thought, what thoughts, feelings, visions come back, or purely having the thought. And you usually get what I describe like a word or a sentence, which would be the chapter heading. But what it is you feel and know the paragraphs after that. And you will screw up and make mistakes in terms of maybe misinterpreting or not understanding at times. But that's why the technique's up for free so people can play with it. And it might be a 10-minute meditation, give or take. But I start, or like when I've taught people this, we start getting it down to like 30 seconds, 20 seconds, 10 seconds. It's not about speed, but multidimensional mind is instant. So an example of this working is with events that I hold at Jai Sanctuary, and I was doing this in America a couple of months ago, but there's a pretty good success rate in most cases where I'll have about 90% of the group get a time and a direction that the orb, the craft, the being is going to appear. So I'm showing people it's not just me going, oh, they're going to appear at this time in this direction. I get the whole group to do it. And it's around, sometimes it's been higher than 90% success rate, but what it shows is that this is repeatable. And not only will each person get like a time or a direction, sometimes I'll get 2 or 3 times in directions. And you just keep ticking it off because they're getting it.
That's amazing.
So
Dude.
it is. And anyone can do it. It's not like you've got to sit there like, on top of meditating on top of a mountain going for hours. And if you want to do that stuff, that is absolutely fine. But it's a natural ability that's right in our face. And I think we try to make it more than what it is, trying to understand the mechanics, where it's more of a feeling and a knowingness of how that mechanics work. But yeah, it's just some food for thought anyway, as I say, for everyone with this type of thing, Jack.
No, that's incredible. All right. So if you do get a being materialized in front of you, now what? What do you do? So you meditate, you try to reach out to it, consciously. And I mean, do you meditate when it appears, or do you should you
Well,
already be in that state?
this is a really good point because some of them are physically materializing, as I've talked about for years. Now, I do have photos and videos of them even here on the property in apparition form. So we've got like full-blown apparitions walking around. I talk about the God being a cloud in the tabernacle. And I've been saying for years, what does a cloud look like? An apparition. And I've got photos of the beings in that form as well. So when the contact occurs, it brings me back to the foundation of initiating contact. Why do you want contact? Because I can tell you now, and I can't prove it, but out of this existence, we know it all. In terms of there's still mysteries to God, source, creator at the hugest extremities, but the extraterrestrial and ultra terrestrial and time traveling component would be the bottom 5% of existence. Then you've got another 90% of what I describe as thought realms created through thought, hitting the angelic and celestial kingdom at the top. Part of me, I'm not getting my words right this morning. But my point with this is when you do this, like I'm somebody that was thrown in this and I was thrown in the public media without looking for it. And there's a part that it destroys you, but it's also the biggest blessing in disguise as well, if you can take it. So why I'm warning this is when you go into the intention that I've got for people is for us as a group, because you're doing it as a group. And this is why I go into Qigong, Yigong. I go into Buddha Palm, a technique of Buddha Palm, which is offshoot of Qigong. I go into different practices. So what we're doing, we're first getting the group in a cohesive energy. Because I've done this in Melbourne with like 150 people in the park. We get broad daylight crafts. But sometimes they'll stay at a distance if there's not a cohesive energy. The smaller the group, even in Sydney one time, the middle of Sydney, we had a craft not high up. It wasn't that far. But what I found and why I usually only work with 15 people at a time at the sanctuary is it's a lot easier to get a cohesive energy, but the mandate for that is universal peace. Now, what I mean by this is we invite those that are in line with the awakening healing of humanity and a peaceful dialogue based under universal peace, basically to reconnect with the greater family of man. Now, on a physicality level and their physicality level, we can say there's an aspect of the illusion of separation and amnesia of not remembering our true nature, because they've even got that to an extent too. But what that does is that's creating the foundation of now what when it occurs. And so when you start interfacing and you're having a thought and you're getting thoughts, feelings, visions back, there comes a moment where it's like even when they appear, time's normal, but outside of you, time is extremely slow, and you start to merge consciousness. So it's hard to explain, but sometimes when people are talking to me like this, they're talking through me too. My voice doesn't change and it doesn't look like I'm going all crazy. But the other thing as well is that can be occurring with the group while I'm speaking, but also, as I said, when you merge consciousness, and we do it even as a group, and it's not like I'm the ambassador of the group and I'm in charge of this. No way, we're all equals going into it. But the questions that you have now subside because everything you know, and everything they know, you know, but you sit in it and you be present in it. So you can start out with like, how many of you are here? Where are you from? Why did you guys come pick up on the message? What's your civilization like? Are you already interfacing with us? Any of the programs that we've got here? Is there any specific messages? Is there any way that you can assist us to assist ourselves with elevating ourselves as we step publicly into the galaxy? So the thing is, a lot of the time people want that contact, but the ramifications of not just your life being turned upside down, relationships, your passions, but also there's a surveillance aspect. There is we could say a whole diverse range of every aspect being influenced and changed, even negative influences, because the more that you're elevating, the more that you're picking up on what's out there and other things see your light. So it's really coming back to self-mastery, which is what I delve in more than anything. But that's where it leads to is, right, if you've got contact right now, what are you going to ask? Because I can tell you now, most people the questions either go out the window of what they had because it's way more amazing than what they thought, or they go into a flight response or a freeze mode, and it's not them that they're weak. It's a bodily response until enough times they can deal with it. And I've seen that with people repeatedly with me, that they get to be able to interface 4, 5, 6 times in, because the first time, as you even hear with me, when you're bouncing off the group, I can be like a teenage girl that's giddy, just screaming, laughing, and just every because the energies bliss you out. And that's partly because of what you're interfacing with. That's a byproduct of their energy. Some of them are very comedic. Some of them are extremely loving to where you've just got constant tears. So I know that's a bit of a packet of information, but it's sort of just the way that I can describe it best for you, Jack.
No, I love it. I mean, there's a lot to get into there. Okay, they're comedic. So which ones are the comedic ones? Are the
The most I'll just break it down to the most craziest one and the most funniest one. Now, people have come up with different names for this being and its race, but I haven't got that. And the way I'll describe it is there is white versions of this, but the main one I interface with is a dark brown. It looks like ET from the movie ET. Its eyes are black, and it's from an area. What it told me was originally it and some of the mantid intelligences are from the area in the universe called GNZ 11. And I actually looked it up, and it does exist, but it said near that area. And I think the reason of that is because it's outlived its home. Like this being and its type, they apparently they can die, but they're not meant to. Like if they haven't got any issues or they're not killed, they can actually live apparently like throughout this whole existence, which is sort of like the way they were designed, which sounds far out there. And this band goes from, we could say, galaxy or star system, what have you. Now it's actually in Orion, but if you remember Ace Ventura, Jim Carrey at the start when he's at the pool and he's doing that sort of thing going right up to the camera, that is how he will start to appear in my mind's eye when the craft's about that he's on. Now, that the craft that he will appear on does look like it's on fire. So I equate it to like, it's like a meteorite. We've had it stationary sitting above us for like a minute before when I was with a friend out of town from my hometown originally. And it looks sort of like a city skyline on top, and the bottom's like half a sphere. I don't think like it'd be that big. Like I've seen variations where there's other types that are very similar and they're extremely big. Some of them are probably the size of an SUV, but it's more. It's just got that humor, like you've got a friend. That their mannerisms and they're they're like the class clown. That is what this being's like. Um, that's just one example with one intelligence that they are comedic and they do have a sense of humor. And this, we're talking here really about a being that's 3D. So we're not talking about something that you tap into spiritually, though you can. It's actually what I'll describe like a Jedi. Really, it's very advanced, which is probably why over time they've mastered a lot of things, like we could say ascension abilities, because of the time that they've got to do that. But yeah, it's one of those things where these beings do have personalities. Some of them do have what I describe as like these beings in the Andromeda Galaxy. I call them the ascended ones. They're orange light beings that can appear in their Merkaba or together, where they'll appear like an orange cylinder type craft. But they've all merged together, and they're like it's like, imagine we're in the Milky Way galaxy. So I'm not talking about the Andromeda constellation at the moment. I'm talking about the Andromeda galaxy. So imagine in the Milky Way galaxy, beings from all different star systems have ascended to a certain state. These beings want to stay at this state momentarily to be of service to others. So it's like the way they explain it to me is that they've all shed a physical form, but they're like a force that anywhere there's an injustice, they go and assist other worlds. And in this case, they've gone from their galaxy assisting similar beings here to help us and others. And why I'm mentioning this is because they're a hive mind intelligence. But what's great is they still embrace the individual aspect of each being within that. So it's not like a Borg complex or anything like that. But this brings us to the aspect now of, can you deal with interfacing with another intelligence that knows everything you've ever done and everything you're trying to hide? Now, it's not a question for you, Jack, it's a question for everyone. Because this is what you're dealing with when you're interfacing with these intelligences. But I will say with that, that they've got love and compassion if they're coming at it from a place of a brother or sister, or the greater family, because there's different, different types of beings out there. Then there are other energies and beings that will try and manipulate and control you based on that, knowing what your vices are, knowing what your triggers are, knowing we could say your Achilles heel or what have you. And so this is something that is for people to consider. Could they handle that? But in the bigger scheme of things, when you shed the physical existence, everything is known. What you do and what you say affects everyone and everything, as I've talked about before, and all of it is known. But the identification game and the guilt that we play here is not in those realms once you come to a place of a higher vibratorial state. I hope that's digestible anyway, the way that I'm trying to explain
No,
this.
no, that was brilliant. And so there's a range of different sorts of beings that we're interacting with or could interact with. Some are these, I think, are the other dimensional. Is that the best way to explain it? These people that can see, everything and know everything. Or is that simply because they're existing in the 3D, but they can interact with us psychically and they can just read our minds? Which is the more appropriate way to think of those particular beings?
It's a bit more of a blend, like beings that are more like us. Like there are people that are extremely, and ETs that are extremely psychic, and even beings that are living here that we would consider ET, but they're not. So they've got extreme psychic abilities to where they can already do that. All right. So it's just a natural byproduct in your own evolution. Just like you might have met somebody before and you just didn't get a good feeling about them. Not that they were a bad person, but just something wasn't right. Now, you amplify that to somebody that has their psionic or psychic abilities in check through practices and exercise, and sometimes just naturally gifted that's turned on. That's just full blown. When you go into, and what I'll say is other ETs are like that too, that are 3D. You've got some that are extremely psychic, some that aren't. But the ones that are usually are in control of the crafts or assisting the crafts through consciousness assisted technologies, or is an extension of their consciousness to where it's like embedded into the craft when it's grown, sometimes from their own DNA. So we can go into that in a little bit because it's a little bit crazy in how some of the psionics can take down the craft, because if you're psionic and they've got a psionic and you happen to be naturally gifted and better than their psionic, you can override their craft. This is the difference. This is where it's like, just because they're AT doesn't mean they're more advanced, because, yeah, the technologically, maybe in some cases. But I talk about this being the inner technology, not just this physical body that nothing can compare to it in the physical universe, but what's operating it. That can override all this. But when you start going up the chain, and I use these days more terms of densities, and there's dimensions within densities, more like a guitar neck is a density, and the strings would be the dimensions or frequencies within that. And you keep going up the chain. And as you go up, these things are just naturally gifts and abilities that are more coherent and just naturally on. And so in those higher states, that's sort of a natural byproduct of reading intention, knowing things about people. But there's also what we'd say is a balance. Like there's stuff I can do like that. And I say it's not like I don't want to be some, animal in a zoo that, you get to do tricks. But I've learned over the years as well is that if you don't have balance with this, you can burn out mentally. Because that's why even with the psionic projects, I can tell you that some of these people are unfortunately off, because they're great for a short period and then you don't want them speaking. They've usually got no families in some cases, especially if they've been part of like some trafficking operation to find people like this. It can be something where you burn out. And I know a lot of the top psychics and remote viewers I have for many years and done a lot of remote viewing over the years as well as teaching it. But this is where balance is needed with that because these things are natural. But if you've got a gift with it, what are you going to do with it? You can do readings and you can be helping people, but there comes a point of going, all right, what is the most beneficial thing I can do with this? And that's not an answer I can even answer myself. I'm trying to figure that out. All I know is that if you can be of service with those abilities, it's great. Otherwise, what's the use of psychic spying and reading people? Showing that you can do it, that's great. But there's a reason you can access that. And that reason is more of service and about ascension and elevation than most can realize until it's sort of like a self-realization experience.
Well, it's one of those things that can be abused or it can be used correctly. It's just like a weapon, or maybe a weapon is the wrong way to say it, but a tool. And you can use it, for service to other people or, service to self. And I would hope that the more elevated people would get access to that tool and not the less elevated people that would misuse it. What's the ratio, do you think?
I don't think there's that many people that go dark with it. And this is actually a really good point that you bring up. What I'll say as an example, some of the reptilians are extremely psychic. Their psionic abilities are off the board with being able to manipulate this frequency. Now, when you're using it for manipulation or lower vibratorial things, you may be, and this is what I start to call dark masters. You may be a master doing dark stuff that service to self, but you actually get capped at a certain point that you can't go and do even all the craziest stuff. So let's say somebody like Padmasambhava, or you could hear the stuff that Yeshua, Jesus could do, or different saints, sages, and masters. What happens is they can elevate and do amazing things like manipulating matter and levitating and manipulating things physically. So that's because of the intention behind it. Now, these people in some ways can start to get to certain levels and then they cap. And it's very known within some of these cultures that when you start doing, in some terms, what I'm doing, taking photos of these beings, this, that, the other, and let's say you can get to a state to where it's more unproductive because it's not about that. Though for me, it's been documenting it. What can happen, and some of them say, like there's even a story about one gentleman that he believes he lost his abilities because he took a photo of one of these beings. And it was a deal that he might have had. I can't speak on that, and I can't remember the exact case, but my point is that the intention is the thing behind it. So what happens is, yes, and it's a good point, demonic, archonic, reptilian, dark influences, they are outside of this frequency, but they're just outside of it. And they can do some things that do appear like magic, but they're capped. And they're capped at what they can do because of their intention. So something I don't normally talk about is even within projects that are outsourced, I believe, by certain governments, and I can't say how I know this, they might be great at remote viewing, and they might even, to some extent, be able to bilocate momentarily, and we could even say, in a way, do this astrally, to where they can do some form of spying. And so they might go to another location, spy on an asset, then they could actually get a spy in that country to break into this place and steal something because before the person went in doing surveillance psychically, and now you've got a physical asset to go in there and get whatever. That's as far as they're going to go, and I've warned people about this because if as soon as you start to weaponize this past a certain point rather than defense reasons, and we do need national and earth defense, you start to cut what you can do and you sort of just naturally cut off. And I don't believe it's anyone else doing it except your higher self going, this is where we've got to cap it. Just like with some of the crafts and the technologies, they're capped at certain points, but they're also created in such a way that once you've got miraculous and amazing things that seem like magic in terms of weaponry and technology, because anything could be used for that, when you're creating these things, you're at a certain level of consciousness that you would not do anything like that. So they do have safeguards that not only physically is their DNA like these devices read the DNA to know who's who, but as an extra safeguard, they also read it from the light blueprint. And they also read it consciously. So there's usually at least two or three connections for some of these beings with their own crafts or devices as safeguards to take safety measures to make sure things can't be used for negativity. So this is where you start to get into areas of, all right, there's that, but then there's beings that don't need any of that, and they're in their light vehicle, their Merkaba, and going into a rainbow body state, which is the ascension body that extraterrestrials are still trying to reach these states of consciousness too, as I say. Just because they're ET doesn't mean they're all,
It's kind
now,
of reassuring that they don't have it all figured out too. That's nice. Now,
100%.
about governments utilizing these technologies or these abilities, for things like spying and things. Well, there's other things that you could potentially do with some of these abilities. Remote influencing, psychic attacks on somebody and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And we know there is a remote viewing program, and there are remote viewers. There is a government interest in these abilities, and it's not a huge stretch to wonder if they've utilized those abilities for other purposes too, like attacks or whatever. Now, are there people on the other side that are defending against that? Does the government employ psychically gifted people to protect themselves against that? You may not know, but I wanted to know if you had any insight into that.
Yeah. I'm sort of going in areas that I haven't spoken about. What I will say is it's not really, you may have people in positions of government that, let's say, aren't actually representing that position, but what they're usually connected to is some sort of outsourcing. So it's like, we'll use for an example, the US government, and look, America is my second home. I've spent so much time there. We're all family, so in no way am I belittling my country, your country whatsoever. I believe this is past any oversight. In either, like, it's beyond. I don't even know what to call it, because even when I meet people that are in black operations that are outside oversight, they all think they're in the Blackest Project. And when I get to know certain things, I realize that they're part of completely different programs, that they don't even know about the other programs because it's compartmentalized very much so, like a USAPs are. But this is beyond even a USAP, this whole operation, and there's layers to it. Now, what the US government have done is, when Project Stargate was known by the mid 90s, what it was basically done now is it was outsourced. It was released. It was found out a number of times going under different names besides Stargate. So what it allowed to do in effect was, when people started to learn through it, through Ed Danes and Joe McMonagle's teaching people and what have you, there's many doing it, including myself. What it's allowed is, in the ethers, to put out there to the masses this method. And what happens is, people actually undo themselves by showing what they can do with remote viewing, and they now become targets for a number of things. Now, this could be psychic espionage. This could be to be outsourced by a business or what have you, an entity that's been asked by a government to maybe do something. And so therefore what it is the government's not doing it themselves. They will have somebody, let's say a representative, again, not in an official position, go to somebody, that somebody goes to somebody else and gives them a target. They don't know what it is. They give the data back. So basically what's happened is they've worked the way around that. So that's a lot of what's happening. But there are assets that are extremely good, that whether it's with psionics or purely with remote viewing, that these people, in some cases that I know of, that you can have 6, 7 of these assets in a room staring at a photo, and they may get, let's say, 10 photos a day. And their job as a group is to sit around that photo and tell that person to kill themselves just for 10 minutes a day. And enough power can be an influence so that person starts having dark, negative thoughts, not realizing why they're even thinking this. And that's where there's a lot of training that's needed once you get to these levels in your basically mastering your thought. This is why it comes back to self-mastery. You also have these groups usually working in cahoots with other groups or at a facility. It could be a dome or just a really high-tech, advanced military facility, because stuff that I spoke about a lot of time, like a long time ago, because I've met a lot of these super soldiers over the years. And what I can tell you is from my experience when I've been to some of these places and bases, and I haven't been part of any programs, mine was more for using technology to derive information with other psionics using technology to know what I know. And I've written about this in my material. But what they can do is they're working with consciousness assisted technologies. In some cases, the technology in and of itself is that good that it can block not just remote viewers out of psychic spies from remote viewing their base. It can even stop extraterrestrials or higher advanced ultra terrestrial intelligences from penetrating those facilities, breaking in, let's say, for 10 seconds, even trying to steal something or find something out, because they're that good at what they do. And sometimes the technology can stop any advanced technologies from even penetrating those facilities. And I'll give you a layman example of this is even with satellite technology that may be able to penetrate more like a thermal type way that it would appear on the devices and see through a roof. These beings and some of the technology used at these bases can even stop that from even working. It's just like just a blank screen that will come up there. So yeah, technology is great, and this does come into the AI realm as well, which we can go into. But like again, like the most advanced thing in physical 3D is this body, and then what's operating it is even more advanced, which is that an aspect of that one consciousness we're all a part of. So it's a very layered thing that we're going into, but just ways that I haven't even approached it publicly before because a lot of this stuff I just don't talk about. It's just sometimes people aren't there yet, and it doesn't mean I actually know everything 100% either. I'm still trying to figure out a lot of the things that are being unraveled daily as well.
Pete, I could pick apart what you just said for hours. I don't know how much of that you could actually speak about, but what you just said was amazing. Again, I don't know how much you can speak to, so I'll ask what I think might be an easy question. You talk about the technology that they use to assist with this, the psychic abilities or to resist psychic abilities, but you've also spoken about how the beings, the NHI, how they also have technology that assists them with these psychic endeavors. So, is the technology that the humans are using, is that gifted or reverse engineered? How do they acquire this technology that sounds in some ways similar to what the beings were using?
Well, that's a really good question. The answer to that, from my understanding, is because some of these beings are our ancient ancestors that have evolved to a certain point, and some of them are our future offspring. It really, in effect, it's humans giving other humans. Just because they were brought up somewhere else or they've been in a certain location, it's there's some variations in colors and height and the way that the bodies operate. But this is where it gets really intriguing also to the temporal component of time travel, that once you've got access to these technologies, that is a component that is involved with it as well. Now, there's various types of this technology, but what I can tell you as well is there's stuff that us humans can do, predominantly weapon wise, that is actually intriguing and something that some of these extraterrestrials want. Because we're pretty I don't think we give ourselves enough credit from what I'm told in terms of what we can do with some of this technology. But a lot of it is operational. Like even if you believe Bob Lazar or not, I'm just going to use this as an analogy, right? Well, Bob talks
I tend to
about
believe
there
Bob.
being project. Yeah. Well, he talks about Project Looking Glass, and there was, the propulsion system. There was different levels because when you're looking at these technologies, there's a number of applications that you can use with it. Just like, let's say, energy. Well, you could power a vehicle, you could power a home. You may be able to now use technologies that needed power that you couldn't build up before now because you've got access to a greater power facility. So there's many applications, as an example, with the craft. That the craft usually has embedded in it uh, many various types of technologies that can be used, and all that one is being fueled. Now, in Bob's case, it was element 115 that's bombarded up to 116. But that was just a power source. There's other power sources that I've even seen as crystals used for crafts. In a similar setup, I saw like not the same, but it was a similar setup to what Bob describes with the sports model. But in the middle was a huge crystal. The objects like the chairs on the craft could move around. The only way I could describe it was like Terminator 2. You know the liquid Terminator, how he could go liquidy
Yeah,
and
yeah.
yeah, like basically like Mercury, how Mercury can move around. So there's different ways that the technology can be worked with. Crystal seems to be a huge component with it, but it's the only way I could describe it in human terms because I've got to come at this from my understanding. These aren't sort of my specialities. My speciality is being able to surpass technology and use consciousness for these things, which is what the ETs are wanting to do as well. Like that's they've got their masters and their sages and what have you, but it's as if the technologies can work quantumly is the best way that I describe it. Like we're on the precipice really on a public format going into quantum technology, which means a lot of our even safety measures with the internet and the way that the internet operates, we're going into a phase where that's going to be everything we've been using is going to be useless compared to quantum. Now, what's happening in effect is these devices are artificially tapping into a field to assist with higher states of consciousness. Now, basically, you're a transhuman with assistance to do psionics rather than doing it naturally is the best way I could describe the way that the technology can work because it goes into the field and it becomes aware. But with some of the crafts and the beings, their consciousness is embedded into what appears to be AI. It's just an extension of them. I hope, again, I keep on saying I hope this is digestible, but it's stuff I just don't talk about much because I just don't know how to get what I know into linear term because and I'm not a scientist or anything else either. I just hope, yeah, it makes
Well, that's
sense.
okay. I'm not either. If you said it in the correct technical terms, it would just go right over my head. But okay, so
So,
getting
yeah.
back to like the beings. Okay, so you said some of them are like our future children, and some of them we're their future children or something. I forget exactly your words there. Which beings?
Oh, yeah, well,
Which
yeah.
yeah?
Well,
Which
it's
beings
just
are the
there
future
us.
us?
Well, it was interesting because I wrote about this a long time ago and I spoke to a few people about this, and I'm talking probably about 13 years ago. Now, I don't know much about Dan Barish, but it was similar. What I've heard from him, and recently, I can't remember the other gentleman, but they were basically saying what I have, and I believe Dan Barish was probably saying it, handful of years before me at least. What was revealed to me was that from some events that apparently don't happen, but yet I'm seeing the effects of it happening. And basically, the Elohim were telling me that because I'm thinking of things in a linear mindset at that time, I didn't understand it then. So there was meant to be certain events to where we went down the transhuman area, but it was also influenced. And what set the stage for that was a solar event. Now, I don't know if it was a solar flash. I was told more about a solar pulse, and it could be just my interpretation of the information because this was an experience with the Elohim. I wrote about this in, I think, 2012 or 13 in a book called Operation Starseed, A Temporal War. And the Elohim, which are these light beings that appear more male or female, but they take on more of a male form, they sometimes pick me up in what I describe as like a crystal cave that's got pulsating light in it. There's nothing in it. It's actually, I believe, a projection of their consciousness to put them in a field to protect them from outside influences. But this landed on my lounge room to where half of my lounge room turned into this craft and the other half, it was like them still there, but it was like half the craft was transparent and the other half was physical. And the only way I can describe this, and this has only happened a few times, is they were able to, how they do it, I don't know, but I'll go into a cathedral in a moment where they take me as well. It's the only term I've got. Imagine it's like a three-dimensional holographic projection system they could do to where in front of me they projected the beings I need to be aware of and the beings that I'm working with. And I knew these beings because I even remember making a deal with them before coming here to be doing what I'm doing. But they were showing me all this. And part of it was that not just, I predominantly talk about beings from Orion and the Pleiades that are coming back from the future. But it was because what was happening was beings that were already there came back and picked up other humans that didn't go underground and took them back to the Pleiades and Orion. And some of these beings, this is where it gets convoluted, were coming from 20 or 40 years, 40,000 years, give or take, into the future. What I'm aware of in sync with that I didn't speak about is also beings apparently from Sirius and Arcturus and even Andromeda have been involved with this too. It was just my strong connections mainly to Orion and the Pleiades where sort of my own distortions went with that because I've got a strong connection to those two areas. The convoluted thing as well is that my understanding that ever lot us in the future, whether it's 20,000 or 40,000, it's still us in the future coming back. If we want to get this even more confusing, I talk about, and some of the original people and researchers here in Australia talk about beings from the Pleiades coming here, manipulating the Denisovian, creating the Aboriginals incarnating. So what I got told about that was that is our future offspring coming back. And we're talking probably about 300,000, 400, maybe two, give or take, that they went back before us now. So this is where this, like when I talk about reincarnation, and this is where the material is, and this is why probably only a certain amount of people can understand what I'm saying. It's not belittling. It's hard to deal with this at times myself, but you've got an aspect where even reincarnation doesn't exist. But you've got to understand reincarnation to understand all your lives are happening at the same time. So instead of like life to life to life to life, imagine your higher self is like the core of a spider web and each strand going out of different lives happening simultaneously, creating new strands. And so if you can understand that, you can understand now, if you can start to get out of linear mind, how that's possible that even us here, we're future humans right now, because the Pleiadians went right back and manipulated this system. So they created a system, manipulated the Denisovian, and then this superhuman, if we want to put that in the terms, gets taken again into the future. And it's almost like a self-perpetuation, uplifting, remodeling going on of the Earth human, which is very convoluted. But partly why I don't talk about this as well is like, how is this helping us be a better person or be of service? It may connect some dots for people, and that can be good for their own thing as well. But this is why I haven't watched a television for nearly 15 years. It's like, what do you do with this?
I don't know what to do with that. That's wild. So there's this weird cosmic circle going on. And the Denisovans were really interesting because they did have like a higher technology level than we did, seemingly based on what little we know about them. So it would, kind of make sense
Well,
that they were in contact with somebody, or maybe they just got there quicker. I don't know, but that's just super fascinating.
well, it does go back as well because the Lyrians were coming back. The way it was revealed to me was 20 plus million years ago. But they're really just using this place as a hub. So when you go into galactic history, whether it's the wars within Orion that originally started in Lyra, and then, like I say, like what's happened here, yeah, it's crazy. But then you go beyond this galaxy and go into even other galaxies and the history of what's happened there with the AI influence and takeover. It's a very layered thing, but still, as I say, still extraterrestrials have to deal with angels and demons as well. And I know that for a fact because I've experienced them. And we're talking not just energetically or in dream state or in the mind's eye. I've physically had experiences. So this is where it was somewhat comforting for me going, we're all just at different stages, but we all still have these higher entities that are part of the immune system in God's mind interfacing with the storylines that's going on in God's mind. Because where I'm at now, as far out as this goes, is I'm convinced we're on a treadmill in God's mind going nowhere.
I don't know if that's encouraging or not.
Well,
But
what's encouraging about it from what I know is even we could say divide like a cell divides in two and create our own mind for people to go and experience as well. That's where I had to stop, we could say, on the complexities of that and seeing the blueprint of everything made up of purple hue dodecahedron. So I'll leave it there anyway because it does my head in.
okay, all right. I wanted to get back to one of the experiences you were talking talking about. Excuse me. I think you mentioned you're aboard a craft, a crystal craft, and you said I think that you're going toward a cathedral.
Oh,
Can you
so
tell us about that?
yeah, so the cathedral, that crystal cave, it's been a handful of experiences there over the years. The other place that I get taken to, it's been a while since I've been there, but I'll see other beings from other worlds there, and they all appear to be somewhat human, maybe different. The only way I can describe this, and it's not exact, but imagine being inside something equivalent to like a cathedral, like a church, like a cathedral, but it's structured from light. And there'll be different colored Elohim there that appear, like we could say, like the colors of the chakras. Depending on the chakra, if you put that in the densities, that will be the color of the Elohim, and that's the domain that they regulate, they oversee. And our highest expression is the Elohim. So the way they've explained it to me is our highest self is a cell of God's body, and we are Elohim. There are some that are creating the constructs of the realms physically from a light blueprint. This place is somewhere that I've gone for meetings with them for some of the stuff that I talk about and for happenings that seem to be just not happening on Earth. These waves of ascension. And they derive information and embed information into us. But what's really interesting when you're there is you can go there non-physically or physically, and when either way when you go there, what is extremely interesting is how us as a group with the information, or even if I'm there by myself with them, the cathedral changes colors depending on your emotions.
A
It's
giant mood ring.
Yeah, but it's so vibrant and it's conscious as well. And what I believe is something similar like the Crystal Cave is it's just a projection for them to interface. Like the analogy would be that some of these crafts that we're seeing that are physical in the skies are actually illusions from one or more beings that are that evolved consciously. They can go into their Merkaba and from that state create anything they want you to see, that you could even go on board it, and they can appear as whatever they want to you within it. It's like you're going into a fake construct, but yet it is real as anything because they're at the level of consciousness they can do these things. And this is where what I will say is take what I'm saying with a grain of salt for this reason that I'll tell you, and I write about this and talk about this often, is a lot of the time they're giving me information that's not 100% a lie, but they've got to tell it in a certain way so I get the final come from. And I'll give you an analogy of this, which I said before. To understand that all lives are happening, they first have to go through the process of other aspects really in the guise of past lives. Reincarnation. Then they'll go into future lives and you start opening up going, what? So I haven't had lives just back then. I've got lives that are already happening there. Then that weans the brain to a state that them telling you all your lives are happening at the same time. But they can't just take you from point A to point Z, and part of this is actually us doing it ourselves, which what I'm saying basically is they're white lies to an extent to get the greater concept, or else it's just too much. It's like trying to get somebody from kindergarten all the way to university. It's something where as they've really pressed with me, and it's been a number of intelligences. Pankay is one of them from Orion. There's Patman from Sirius, which are two regular contacts, as well as Shiji from the Pleiades. But the common theme that has really been emphasized the last probably 3-4 years to me with disclosure is part of my message has been to get out to not lose our sovereignty. That just because something is appearing as more evolved, don't let it consume us, but let's meet it like this. Rather than like they're up here and we're down here looking up. They look up to us, a lot of these intelligences, with how we don't realize what we're capable of. And Operation Starseed basically went into the premise when I wrote that of how many evolved beings have come back to assist Earth from a draconian cabal system and what I call the fallen ones, or the ones void of light, the lower light, which are the fallen Elohim, which went out in God's mind and didn't want to go back because they loved what they could do outside of it. They created an AI that's capped a lot of worlds, and they're behind that cap, which is the veil. And because they're not doing it directly influencing, they haven't broke universal law. So there's beings like us said, how do we get around that? Let's incarnate, put an aspect of ourselves in those bodies and help the human experience from within to elevate. But there is some more to the story of that. We seem to be a super being in the 3D realm because we're a conglomerate of many species, including angelic, mixed from the light blueprint, which is sort of where I call it the geometric light realms, where the angels reside, where they can go fractal from. Yeah, I've gone on a bit there because it's where it's leading from.
Man, I could
So
listen to that all day. That is just incredible. I mean, I want to hear about like every single angelic experience you've ever had, but I know time is limited, and I know we wanted to talk a little bit about the shift and the ascension, and changes that are ongoing in the world right now. So, what do you see, and what have you learned and divined about? What is going on right now, energetically, spiritually? Is there an ascension happening? Are there beings assisting? What's going on?
we go through these yugas and cycles, but if I told you I knew exactly what was going on, it wouldn't be the truth. And I've got to preface, I don't know what's going on. And the thing is, most of these beings don't either. They may have more intel or be aware of more behind the scenes with operations than what's privy even to a lot of contactees and experiences and even government. But what we do know is that there are cycles and opportunities to elevate. And these chaos times, there's growth within it. So I'll give the analogy of what happened the last week or so. We had what happened in America, which is extremely sad. We actually had two events. One was on a bus and one was at a college or university. We also had an eclipse and a full moon and an hour and a half long, I believe, solar flare at the same time, apparently. I got told that, so people have to research that, but I was told there was a solar flare that went for an hour and a half. We also have Atlas coming at us. All these things, as airy-fairy as they sound, have an influence on emotions and usually happen in situations where things are going crazy. For example, with the solar maximum, I forget the gentleman who's actually delved into this, but there was some type of study done where somebody went back where they could in history, and when you go into solar maximum, there are economic turmoil, political upheaval, social upheavals. There seems to be like a shaking up of the ants nest called planet Earth. And then when it goes in the minimum, everything changes. Now, I use the equivalent of this like ghost hunting. Who here watching? I don't know if you do, Jack. Remember the show Taps Ghost Hunters?
No, I don't think I've seen Taps.
Do you remember that? It was It's called Ghost Hunters, and it was done by two plumbers originally. They call them Taps, Transatlantic Paranormal Society, going back to probably like the early 2000s. It was a well-known ghost hunting
that
show.
was that was before I got into all this, but I did do some ghost hunting. But yeah, keep on going.
yeah. So that was a popular show. Why I bring that up is there was a really interesting thing that they brought up, which was a fear cage. Have you ever heard of the premise of a fear cage?
No.
So what they go on about, and I've actually found this in Australia when I was brought to some locations, and usually people are sleeping in a very bad spot. So what a fear cage is in America more predominantly because you've got basements. They would go into a basement and get the EMF detector out, and there would be extremely high readings. Now, whether that was bad wiring or just the way that the basement's designed or what have you, could be a number of reasons. When you're exposed to off the scale rate like EMF, things like nausea, anxiety, hallucinating, I mean, like, there's a list that you can look up that is something that's really is science based. It really affects people, and they may even think they got an ailment or a disease, this, that, the other. The doctor can't work it out. One of the things I found common in some investigations, people are sleeping right next to a PowerPoint that's got high EMF readings. Now, it's not all PowerPoints, but sometimes where they are or how they'll shielded or whatever can give off huge EMF. But when you're in a room that the whole thing's got wiring and there might be a power board in there and everything and it's not shielded, these are the things that happen. Now, why I'm saying this is what's happening when there's huge CMEs coming in, not to that extent, but the whole earth is getting smashed. And what's happening is people looking down, people being clumsy, more accidents are happening, more outbursts are happening. Now, just like with astrology, you can dictate your life going, I'm not going to do this today because my astrology says so. Or you could look at this from a self-mastery perspective of how can I elevate this? I know that this is the template I've got to deal with. Just like with astrology, and somebody might be a Scorpio or Libra or what have you, there's these sort of base template sort of frames that the personalities have. But you can't let that be your identity. What it is this is something that you can transcend and elevate because now you're aware of it. But most of the population are unaware of how we're affected in the mind of God, because the way it's been explained to me is that at the core of each galaxy is basically a natural portal that connects to other galaxies. But there's also energy coming in from source that goes to all the stars that are projecting this physical reality and affecting the planetary bodies that reside around them. Not only that, some of these species actually use the stars to travel and traverse the galaxy and galaxies.
I've talked
So,
about it on the channel several times. Yeah.
yeah, so there's a lot in the UV, in the infrared spectrum, and we could say other forms of the electromagnetic spectrum that I believe we probably don't know at all yet. And why I say that is it used to be we can only see visible light, which is a fraction of 0.005% of physical matter of the electromagnetic spectrum. Now they say it's 0.003, the whole bandwidth of the electromagnetic spectrum is of out of 100% of everything that we can even measure. So not only are we like blind through the five sense reality and what we can intuitively feel and see, that sort of makes it more like maybe this is a projection of our own illusion and we're only seeing a bandwidth that we're privy to in our Earth human experience. Because it seems that everything is connected from consciousness and awareness, which goes into a vibratorial state, which is sound. Sound creates light, light creates matter, and I believe they're interchangeable. And science is backing this up more and more now with some of what I've just said. So once you understand this, it really comes down to, are you steering the ship and where do you want to steer the ship, which is your Earth human experience. And some of these ETs seem to understand it, but it's what's beyond the ETs up to the Angelics that actually really understand that, which is probably why they're at the states of consciousness they're in.
Okay, and the little time we have remaining, what are your thoughts if somebody is interested in learning about self-mastery? And I know you probably have a lot of courses and information on this. Where can you direct them to go to learn about this?
Well, I've got one book on it, and there's just really like a one-stop shop online course that I've got though in the like the in-person stuff I do at the sanctuary and sometimes around the world. I sort of go more and more into things, but really what I would say is just start Googling, YouTubing at the very least, and just see where the universe takes you. It might be to something I did. It might be to Shi Hung Yi or, whoever. It could be James Gilliland. It could be Sadhguru. It could be who knows. But my thing is just start investigating, because usually what happens, and you would have experienced it, Jack, you type in a topic you've just found out about, and all of a sudden you go down a rabbit hole, and it's almost, and I'm sure it is, the universe putting the next thing in front of you. And everyone's self mastery path is different. The one common thing that we've all got is that we're actually all going through it, whether we realize it or not. So I'd say that doesn't have to be my material. There is a lot of free resources on my website, which I've now put in the one site at jayasanctuary.com, Jaya. Though all the old links to the other websites, ESETI Australia and Peter Maxwell Slattery, lead to there. But the biggest thing is following your intuition and knowing that going into the unknown, it can be fearful and it can be scary. But if the heart's pulling you, I think you've got exciting times ahead. And they will be trying, but it's really to show you what you're made out of and what you're truly capable of.
Love it, man. All right. Well, where else can people find you other than the Jaya Sanctuary website? If they have any questions for you, if they want to interact with you, where can you be found?
Yeah, so on there, there is links, and they'll be able to find me even under my normal name on like Twitter, LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, all the normal sort of, the normal sort of stuff, YouTube as well, and Rumble, and Telegram as well. So I think social or Truth Social I'm on as well. Like I've tried putting a lot of stuff out because there's a lot of stuff that does get blocked that I've been doing over the years as well. So I've just tried to just fan out and hit a lot of sites daily, just to get the information out, because there's a lot that are trying to stop people like us doing what we're doing.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today and joining us today. I loved it. I hope you come back soon because there's so much in what you said. I want to dive in deeper and get your thoughts on other things too. You're just awesome, man. And thank you for doing what you do.
Nah, same to you, Jack. And yeah, just let us know and we can make this happen in future again. And I've enjoyed our conversation, or me mainly yapping away. So it's been good, mate.
Thank God you do, man.